we just found a place that has like its own secluded little interviewing room.
Nice.
I'm very excited about that.
Yeah.
The wife wants to set up a gaming room. That's always a plus, right?
Yep.
So those nights, long nights of after work, getting some gaming in, like, hey, come join me. Don't get mad that I'm, gaming all night. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. Got to have that. Quick note. One thing, I'm hoping it's not going to interfere with anything. I'm expecting a repairman to come a little later today. They're going to call me before they come, so I know it's going to be live, and I'll try to not have to answer my phone while it rings. But there's a tiny window where my wife won't be able to answer it. I'll just go, yes, you can come now, and that'll be the end of it. So I may just be like, talk for a minute, but I don't think that'll happen. So fingers crossed.
that's cool. I'm trying to think of if you
I mean, I can mute myself for 2, but it'll be like a 12-second phone call.
Yeah, if you like, I don't know, like hold up your phone. I can hurry up and just change it to campaign and then just solo screen it. Boom.
Gotcha. Perfect. I'll do that. And she's got the phone right now because she's still got about 20 minutes for her meeting. So it's just like a tiny overlap between us talking.
Yeah, you're good.
Just in case that happened, I just wanted to warn you, but hopefully it won't.
That would not be the craziest thing that's happened on the show. There's been so many insane things that's happened.
Sure.
And that's what I love most about this is kind of just like how insane and insane shows can get. It's just human life in general, right?
Absolutely.
So everyone that is watching, right here is the title we're going to be talking about today, the 8-Bit Slasher Collector's Edition. I had the chance to read a decent amount of this, and I loved it. I mean, it was cool because I was reading it. You was getting like a live reaction when I would just like stop it. I'm like, dude, this is okay. All right, I see what you did here. Like, so thank you for that opportunity. We are green across the board, and I am good to go as long as you are good to go.
I'm good to go.
All right, let me get my little notepad, handy dandy notepad pulled up.
Of course.
Right there is a link for everyone. Be sure to check it out and back today. If you're not able to back, put this on Facebook, Twitter, anywhere you can. Word of mouth is 100% free, and it costs you absolutely nothing to do. And who doesn't love a good slasher, right? I mean, so let's begin in 3, 2, 1. Yo, what's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to yet again another fantastic episode of Keeping It Geekly. It's your Cape Crusader Cody, and we're hanging out with our new guest, Mike Spring. We're here to talk about the 8-Bit Slasher and everything in between. Mike, welcome to the show. I know this is your first time on. How are you doing today?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here. First time, and hopefully not the last time.
Absolutely, and thank you for the opportunity to read this. I know we started the show a little late, but honestly, it's, we were talking backstage about the importance of kind of just knowing the material and just kind of getting a good feel for it. And I'm glad I did, because this book was fantastic. I loved the setup. I love the Easter eggs. I love the breadcrumbs. And of course the kills, which I think are some of the most important aspects of a slasher.
Yeah. I worked hard on those. I appreciate you saying that. I wanted to, create a book that married a lot of things that I love, right? So it's video games meets slasher films meets meta comedy. And so I thought it was important to kind of get all of those things right, so I had to kind of dive into the video game side of things a bit. But the slasher side, you have to have, you got to have good kills. You got to have surprising kills. But I also wanted to sort of play with the rules a little bit. And I won't spoil how, because I'm very anti-spoiler, but I think I do 1 or 2 things that kind of maybe play with the conventions of some of the slasher norms, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we dive too deep and slash our way through this book, let's talk about where it all began for you. Mike, how did you end up getting started in your comic career?
So, I've been reading comics since I was about 5 years old. So, which is so many years now.
What was
but it's
your first title?
Yeah. What's that?
What was the first
Was
title
my first title? Transformers.
Oh, that's so awesome. What a great comic to start with.
Yep. It was Transformers number 3 was really the like my origin story, if you will. Because if you remember, the original Marvel Transformers issue 3 had Spider-Man in it in his black costume, but it was the Venom costume before we knew he was going to become Venom. And so I'm reading this comic because it's about Transformers, which I loved. But then I see Spider-Man and his suit is like transforming from like his black suit to his street clothes. And I'm like, what is that? That's really cool. I've only seen Spider-Man in the cartoons. So then I started buying Spider-Man comics, and then that's the end of my life, basically. That's where it's just been all comic books since then. So But yeah, so I've been reading comics my whole life. I actually owned a comic book store for 8 years in
Oh,
another
that's so
lifetime.
cool.
Yeah, which I loved. And I've always been a writer of sorts. I've always written for jobs that I've had. I've written some prose novels, things like that. I was always very intimidated by comic books because um, I I would never know. Like I'd always think about writing comic books, and then I'd be like, I don't know. Like I don't know what I would do. Like I don't have a Spider-Man story in my head. What am I going to do with Spider-Man for 12 issues? And the epiphany moment for me was when I realized that Marvel is not knocking down my door to get me to write Spider-Man. So I don't really need to worry about
Hmm.
not having a Spider-Man story yet. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And it was like, oh, maybe I just write my own thing instead. And once I sort of realized that I could do that, that's when I started writing my first comic, which is about 5 years ago now, and it's been just full steam ahead since then. So that's really how I got into it. Was just sort of recognizing that, oh, this is not impossible. I just need to kind of figure out my way in first, and it's been going pretty well.
Isn't it crazy the barriers that we self-impose on ourselves without truly realizing it?
It really is. It was, when I wrote my first comic, I wrote it as a single issue. I had a 4 issue miniseries, and I had the idea in my head for quite some time, and that's when it really started to kind of come with this moment of realizing, I can write my own thing. And then I had this idea, and I couldn't get rid of it, and I had to write it, and then I wrote it, and when I finally put it all together, with the art and the coloring, the lettering, and everything, and I must have reread it after it was printed, 100 times, and yeah, obviously there's always some things you would want to improve on, but I still read it and go, this is pretty good. Like I'm, like I did a pretty good job with this, and it's like I'm not saying I'm, Alan Moore or Mark Waid or Tom Taylor or anybody like that, but I like this is an enjoyable comic that people will like. And I think I have enough of a skill for it that, I should have started sooner, but I was, like you said, these self-imposed barriers, so I'm glad I got that out of the way.
So owning a comics shop, what was the name of it?
I was called Comic Connection. It was down in
I
Orlando,
love
Florida.
it. Such a
Yeah.
good name.
Yeah, it was fun. It turns out there's a few other ones in the country that were named that at the time, which we didn't realize, Um, but, you know, this was in the slightly earlier days of the internet, so not quite so it wasn't just looking it up on your phone, you know what I mean? But it served us well. It was a lot of fun. It was a great experience. I met a lot of great people, I met a lot of comic artists and big name, comic book writers and artists through the store, because obviously Orlando, people were coming down for their vacations with their families and stuff. So, yeah, it was a great experience. I really enjoyed it.
So, what was the first genre you dove into within the comic world?
It was
Creating.
superheroes. Yeah, it was superheroes.
Yeah.
I love superheroes. Always have. I know it's kind of the standard thing, but I'm a big superhero fan. I make no apologies for that or for superheroes. But I'm also a big comedy guy. I don't know that I'll ever write something that's just fully serious without any comedy in it. So my first comic it's called Red, White, and Broke, and it's a superhero comedy about a very archetypal, Superman like superhero who can't keep a job because he always flies off to save the world, and then he gets fired from his day job because, like, it's great in the comics when you're a billionaire, like, Tony Stark or Bruce Wayne, or you have a job like Peter Parker who's a photographer. But like if you're
Hmm.
just some dude who works at like Staples, or Burger King, and you're like, yeah, I was gone for 7 hours because I was fighting a giant space gerbil. It's like, yeah, okay, well, if you can't tell them the reason you're gone, they're just gonna be fire you. Like you didn't show up for
Yeah.
your shift
Yeah.
3 days in a row. Like you're fired. So he basically can't pay his bills because he can't hold a job. And so that's kind of kind of a little bit of a deconstruction of like, okay, in the real world, how would you pay for being a superhero?
Yeah.
So it's a lot of superhero like classic sort of tropes, but then also a bit of a humorous deconstruction of it. So yeah, right in on the superhero thing, but with a slightly different flavor, I hope.
Which is really cool, like to dive into for your first title, like to break away, I guess, from the main like hero, like good guy versus bad guy. It's like to
Yeah,
actually break it down to like, how does this dude survive if he doesn't
right.
have a fortune funding his goals and stuff. I think that's such a cool way to approach the comic genre.
Yeah.
What led you to getting into horror and slashers?
So, there's two answers to that. One is deeply resonates with my geeky soul, and one is a little bit more crassly commercial. I set up at a lot of conventions. I have two superhero graphic novels, and I do pretty well selling them. But there's a lot of people that go to comic conventions who are either not into comic books, they're there for the other stuff, the celebrities, the magic cards, the Pokemon, the toys, all that stuff. And there's a lot of people who are there who read comic books but don't like superheroes.
Mhm.
And so when I wanted to write my next book, I wanted to break away from the superhero genre a little bit. And I was like, okay, well, first of all, what do I love? Right? I love slasher films. I grew up playing these classic video games, but I also noticed that at the conventions, there's a lot of people who are into horror and a lot of people who are into video games. And it was basically it all sort of just came together in one moment and went, and this name of the 8-bit slasher popped into my head. That's like old school video games and slasher right there in 3 words. And it just was like, that was it. I was off and running with that, and then it gives me something that I really loved all the influences for, but if I may say so, it sells at the conventions. It's like people just throw money at me. I tell them the concept of the book, they're like sold. You know what I mean? Because it appeals to everybody almost. Video game fans, they're interested. Slasher fans, they're interested. Comic book fans, they're interested. People who like comedy are interested. So it covers a wide swath. And then I have some people still though who go right. They're like, nah, not interested in that, but I want the superhero stuff. I'm like, okay, I got you covered either way.
So
But yeah,
what was
basically I branch out a little bit, but I'm not done with superheroes yet. But I wanted to kind of, do something different as well.
what were some of your favorite slasher movies growing up as a kid?
Sure. So, well, yeah, here's interestingly, as a kid, I was very scared of a lot of things.
Oh, I
Um,
love that. That's the
yeah,
best.
I didn't watch a lot of horror as a kid. As a teenager, I started watching some of like the Child's Play movies because they seemed fairly like not that scary. But right around like when I think like I turned like 19 or 20, a friend of mine introduced me to Halloween, the first Halloween, and that was pretty much the end of it.
Yeah.
So now I've watched the entire Halloween franchise 18 times probably. All of the Friday 13th, all the Nightmare on Elm Street, like all of all of the ones I've seen multiple times because I love them all. Scream was another big influence for me because that humor piece. So that was so around 96 or so when Scream came out. Really was where it was all sort of coming together. So Halloween's my favorite horror movie of all time. The original Halloween's my favorite. And Halloween and Scream are my two biggest favorite
Mhm.
franchises. So when you look at the book, what you'll notice is one, we have kind of your archetypal, Jason slash Michael Myers, like masked big killer, doesn't say anything, kind of just shows up and kills people, right? So I really wanted to get to that classic slasher, archetype. But two, that meta comedy, right, of the video game stuff and the deconstruction again of sort of this, there's the guy who knows what's happening because he's
Mhm.
played the video games and watched the slasher films. That's a direct influence from Scream, hopefully in a different way. I tried not to just rip Scream off, but there might be a little bit of Randy from Scream in one of my characters, Jeff. It's inevitable to not have a little bit of comparison there.
We have our good friends over on Twitch, Dragsdo and Luis from Comic Book Yeti. Welcome to the stream. I hope you guys are doing good. We are talking about this awesome book right here, guys. And if you're interested, feel free to check out that link right there. And back today, simply putting that wherever you can works just as well. Word of mouth is 100% free, and it costs you absolutely nothing to do. So the 8-bit slasher collector's edition. This is a newly expanded version of the hit video game meets slasher film's graphic novel. Over 30 pages of new material. How was the move to Source Point Press with everything? You said you just recently got picked up by them?
I did, yeah. It's been very exciting, actually. So I met with the publisher at New York Comic Con. I gave him my book, and I'll say this: I've handed my books out to publishers at conventions many times before, and 100% of the times, you absolutely know that book is going to go either into the garbage or into somebody's backpack and never get looked at again, or into a box on the convention table. You can just tell, right? They're just not
Mhm.
interested. And Dirk Manning, the publisher at Source Point, was not that. It was hands down. We talked at length. He was interested. I left going, this guy's actually going to read my book, which I'd never had that experience before. And lo and behold, turns out he did. And so we were in contact, and he got back to me, and it had been reviewed by the editorial team, and they said they wanted to distribute it,
Mhm.
which is very exciting. It was kind of a nice validation of, I'm not going to lie, as an indie comics publisher, I've had a lot of people at conventions who read the book and come back and tell me they love it. And there's nothing I like better than that. And I've always known if I could just get it in the right person's hand, right, that somebody would publish it, because
Yeah.
I'm a pretty firm believer that this book is awesome. I'm not gonna I can pretend to be humble about it, but I'm
It
not
is
gonna do
pretty
that.
awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so when I got it to somebody who works in the field and a whole team of editors read it and decided, hey, this is good enough for us to distribute, it was like, thank you. Like that's what, because like that's what I've been saying. Why nobody's just listening to me, right? So that's been really exciting. Um, so it's the original version was a 52-page graphic novel, and so SourcePoint, they needed more pages than that to get it out into their distribution cycle to be a full graphic novel, because they're doing graphic novels, and I do all my books now as graphic novels instead of single issues. So this Kickstarter is funding a collector's edition, which takes the original graphic novel, like you said, adds about 30 pages of new material, hopefully more. I'm just waiting to put it all together. I'm thinking it's gonna be closer to like 90 pages when it's all done. It adds a new story, so that if people have read the first one, there's a new 10-page story
Okay.
that is going to kind of give the origin of, it's going even more meta. It's the origin of the character who the video game character is based on. So it's kind of like the history of Eddie Mayhem, but not within the comic book story, but sort of like in the real world, right? Like about his movies and his action figures and
Oh,
how he
that's
became
cool.
so popular and stuff like that. So it's kind of like a documentary on this main character, the slasher character. And then a bunch of other cool stuff. I've got some cartoons that I've drawn, which are terrible, but they're kind of funny. There's a full cover gallery. There's some really great behind the scenes material by my artist, who we talked before the show is, when people see the interiors, I think they're pretty impressed. So some of his design work and everything. So it's a lot of bang for your buck. And this way I'll have enough page count for SourcePoint to get it out there nationwide, which is of course, the goal.
Mike, you have a really awesome approach to comics. I really love the way you design these concepts and stories. I mean, it is so cool to do like a little like 10 pager of like who this actually, the main, like dive so meta like into the
Yep.
main character and his life. That's such a cool concept. So let's talk a little bit about this book. I had the
Sure.
chance to read it. As we mentioned earlier, we kind of set the podcast a few minutes later, so that way I can get some pages in to make sure I had a taste of this, and I'm glad I did. This book was awesome. I love the interiors. I love the start of it. Am I allowed to talk about what I read?
Yeah, of course, by all
Okay.
means.
So I mean, dude, Carpenter Hall. Right off the rip, the name was just such a perfect Easter egg, and I love when like slashers and horror movies do that. Right, like you'll see that
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of times, like a movie poster or
Mhm.
like a football team or something will have like a nod.
Yep.
And I thought that was like the perfect little tip. And I really love how we meet these characters. You kind of, I wouldn't say grow to love them, but like you're like, okay, these guys are buddies.
Mhm.
And it's like no one's safe in this book is my favorite part. So like it even reading like just 15 pages into it, and then like flipping back to that first page, it's like, Mike, you're diabolical with these characters.
Well, thank you. I try. It's funny, it's so hard with slashers, right? Because ultimately everyone knows people have to die, right? And you can only, unless you create a cast of 30 characters, there's only a handful of people to choose from. So it's hard to surprise people, I think, and as a comic fan, there's nothing I love more, and as a movie fan, because I'm a big, huge movie fan, there's nothing I love more than being surprised, right? A twist ending, a shocking moment, right? Something that takes me by surprise. That's my favorite thing ever. And so I knew I was going to be limited, sort of in terms of like who lives, who dies. I can keep you in suspense on that a little bit, but we know some characters probably aren't going to make it. But I really tried hard to sort of like, change up when and where and how and who lives and who doesn't. And I've gotten some really good compliments from people that, I won't say who, but the first character to die, I've had a few people be like, I did not see that coming,
Oh, I
that
didn't
was,
either. That was yeah, we were talking backstage about that. I
yeah,
really loved. Yeah.
right. So that's been fun to see that I think I pulled that part off. And then at the same time, I wanted the characters to be kind of, again, I work with archetypes a lot, and what I mean by that, is I try to work within the idea of very familiar characters. I wrote this book, it's 52 pages, right? And it's a slasher, and there's video games. And I didn't want 30 pages of setup, right? I wanted to get to the kills, and the action. I think the first kill is within like 5 pages, right? Maybe 5, 6, I forget exactly, but whatever. The point is, right, I didn't want to, you know, have to explain who all these people are, to the point that, they're because they're such nuanced, interesting characters that you've never seen before. And it's kind of like, that's great for other people to do, right?
Mhm.
But I wanted to be like, the minute you see the slasher character, you get it. He kills teenagers, right? Like that's what you look at him and you're like, I get it. He kills people. I don't need to explain it to you. The main characters that he's after are these, this group of college students. And again, I tried to make them interesting and original and characters that you would, get into enough to care about. But they're, you got your jock, you know what I mean? You got your pretty girl, you know what I mean? Like you've got your nerdy guy. They're not like, who is this person? Let me study this character so I can understand their motivations. It's like, I get it. I read a couple panels of dialogue. I know who they are. And that way we
Mhm.
can get into it faster, because I like a fun, kind of fast, rewarding reading experience. When I'm reading comic books, and I read a lot, and believe me, my comic store, I buy them some nice cars because I spend so much money at my local comic shop every week. And I buy comics and I read them sometimes, and I'm like, I just read 20 pages of an X-Men comic and nothing happened,
Like, when's the
and it
payoff
makes
happening?
me
Yeah.
think, you know what I mean? Like, and I just picked X-Men out of thin air. That's not a commentary on any current writers. But it's like sometimes that happens, and I'm like, can we just get to the good stuff? Like, so I think that I managed to bring in enough character development that they're interesting characters, but it's also like, okay, we get who they are. Let's make things happen now,
Was that challenging to go from writing a superhero to writing a cast of characters like that?
A little bit in that so a little bit in that I mostly had focused my first couple of books mostly had like two main characters in them. And I will tell you a funny story. Actually, I shouldn't say this. I shouldn't reveal this story, but I'm going to tell you anyway. The first character, well, the second character, I guess, to die, but one of the first of the core group of characters that dies was actually an accident because when I sent the script to my artist, I mixed up the name of two of the characters in the script. So I sent it to him, and he sends me back the page, and I'm like, "Well, that's not who was supposed to die." And then I looked at the script, and I'm like, "No, that's who I wrote because I mixed up their names." And then I was like, I kind of like it actually. Like I wasn't expecting that, and now
Mhm.
it means nobody else will. So I stuck with it, and that's one of the ones I get a lot of compliments on from people. But it is definitely a matter of like I'm not the most disciplined writer in the world, and so having all these characters, I literally mixed up two of the characters' names and killed the wrong one by accident. But I think it made the book better. And what's funny is the other character who will remain unnamed, but the other character who lived by accident, I've been told by multiple people that they are the reader's favorite character, that that's the character people really gravitated towards, that they really liked. I think that something about how I wrote them really connected with people. So it was a happy accident, but that's the behind the scenes story of that.
All right. Well, give me 1 second. I
Sure.
did have this pulled up, and I must have accidentally deleted it. Let's pull the campaign and take a look at what we're talking about a little bit up close. I know you guys had a chance to see this on a scrolling image slideshow, but now we get to kind of see it large and in the flesh. I love this cover right here. We were talking backstage about it. This is such the perfect nod to Super Mario 3, I believe.
Yep, it is Super Mario 3. You got it.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
is so cool.
I'm glad.
And the mask, I love the mask as well. The perfect nod to Jason, but with your own like little flair as well. Is there any special symbolism like with the X?
I mean, yes and no. It's nothing deep. I was kind of going originally, so I thought originally of it was gonna start as a white mask, and then for every kill, he would add like one red slash to it. And then I
Okay.
was like, I don't want my artist to quit this book because that sounds like a nightmare. So, and I wanted something that, again, I wanted kind of the mask idea so that you'd see him and you'd know, but I didn't want it to look too much like Jason either. So I was like, the red X just kind of gives the idea of like, death, slashing. It kind of has that feel. So that was definitely something I thought of early once I went away with the other idea, and I think it makes a really striking visual, so I'm happy with it.
I really, really enjoyed uh, the introduction to the main bad guy. Like, I think we were talking, about this earlier. The kills are just as important, I feel, as the introduction to the slasher themselves.
Hmm.
And Eddie Mayhem is his introduction was awesome.
Right.
8-bit Brawler is the game that he springs from, and I thought it was such a cool design for the game cartridge as well. We see all these mix of characters. Are there any special nods to any like games that you played in there?
So, yeah, I mean, so I'm an old school video gamer, and I played, when I was at my highest, my teenage years playing video games, right? It was, Mortal Kombat, Double Dragon, Virtua Fighter, like the X-Men and Ninja Turtles arcade games, cabinets and things like that, right? So, with the story, because the story, as you mentioned, how the killer's introduced, right? He gets by a story element I won't explain right here. He gets pulled out. They're playing this video game. He's like a DLC type of character that he gets pulled into the real world. So you have this slasher who came out of the video game killing people. And throughout the story, the video game world starts to kind of follow him in. And so what I did was I tried to go back to a lot of those sort of classic video game elements, right? Things like, there's a scene where they can't go backwards to run away from him because they're in a side scroller and like the screen has moved on, so you can't go backwards, right? There's one of my favorite, I don't want to spoil anything, but one of my favorite jokes involves like a health item. There's like power ups and things that these real world characters start to get to use because the video game world is sort of seeping into the real world with Eddie Mayhem. So yeah, a lot of nods to sort of those classic games, and a million other ones that I played back in the day that I'm like Ninja Gaiden, things like that,
That was a hard one.
Yeah, it was. And actually I have, if I can make it work, when I do the sequel, I have a whole Ninja Gaiden inspired visual that I want to try and make a 2-page spread. We'll see. We'll see if I can make that happen, but it's in my head.
So let's go ahead and check out some of these rewards as well. I really loved the first kill. The first kill was cool. Are we allowed to talk about like the introduction, like how he pops on the scene, or do you want to kind of leave that?
No, we can talk about it.
So I thought it was so cool. They're they're at a party playing the game, and then he just pops out of the screen. And one thing that really was so immersive for me as a reader was like, you had all these characters, like they're fleshed out, human, and he had all these like glitching designs around him to kind of just separate him from the real world. And I thought that was such a cool touch of detail.
Yeah. Another thing I think my artist maybe hated me for a little bit, because it's pretty consistent throughout the book that whenever he shows up, he's always got these little like bits or glyphs or whatever what are digital, artifacts kind of floating around him a little bit. And I'm sure it was a lot of extra work, but it's worth it, I think. And I think when he shows up that first time, right, that there's a full page reveal of him, which I'm a huge fan of, and I didn't draw it, so I can say that. But then I made sure that carries throughout the book, and there's even a couple of scenes where like, he gets like hit with a pipe, and you can see his face like pixelate, but then it reforms because, of course, he's a slasher.
Oh, that's cool.
That's a very kind of intentional thing to make sure that he always look like a video game character. Early on, I actually had the idea of making him literally like an 8-bit character, and that he would only ever flip sides, and like his hand would go like this, like a Mario. But I thought that would actually be kind of ridiculous, and I vetoed that, and I'm glad I did. I don't think it would have worked.
You gotta pump the brakes a little bit sometimes, right?
yeah, that's exactly what it was. I'm like, oh, he's never gonna look different than just this, and I'm like, nah, it's too much. I can't go that meta.
So what can readers expect in terms of kills? I know the first two. Do we want to talk about the second one as well?
I don't want to spoil who it is, but I'll say that I think it's a big surprise. That's the one that sort of happened by accident. But I do think it's one of my favorite moments in the book.
I like the sound effect.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. So my letterer did an amazing job with all the sound effects, but I literally wrote them all out because, I guess sometimes I overthink things. I'm very like gut feel, like obviously mixed up characters, not a very detailed person, but I also tend to focus on very specific things because I think they're integral to the experience. So like for me, with this, I wanted to make sure that the kind of slasher kill sound effects, really, because it's on a page, really sort of represented what you'd see in a slasher film. And likewise with the video game sound effects, there was a lot of things I had to kind of creatively in my head be like, what would that sound like? It's kind of like a like, how do I, represent that on the page, so I spent a lot of time writing out for my letterer the actual letters that would go into the sound effects, and then trying to vary them so they didn't all just say "cursed," and it wasn't the same thing over and over again. So I appreciate that you noticed that. Thank you.
Can we get a shout out for the creative team that's involved?
Please. Yes, of course. So my artist is he's a penciler and inker named Dennis Torona. He's amazing. He's actually drawn all three of my graphic novels, and he's going to be doing the next one as well. He basically can read my mind. So I write very loose. I write dialogue first. That's how I write my books. I write dialogue
Mhm.
first. I'm picturing it in my head, but I'm all about dialogue. So I write that out, and then I'm like, oh yeah, character, A walks into a room and character B kills them. And that's pretty much what my scripts look like. They're not very detailed, but he has this great way of pulling out and making better what's in my head with very
Yeah.
minimal direction. So I keep using him because he's phenomenal. My colorist is Osvaldo Ferreira. He is also an amazing colorist. As you can see, he really kind of captured I wanted it to be bright and colorful and video game like. I wasn't going for like the dark, muted, mature readers kind of look that a lot of people go for. Nothing against that, just not what I wanted for this book. And then my letterer is Dave Lentz. He's lettered a million books for every publisher you can imagine. And so he did all those great sound effects for me. So and then my covers, you've got the classic cover, the one that was on the previous book by by Ryan Brown, who's done covers for everything you can imagine. A lot of things like Ninja Turtles and He-Man and Transformers and GI Joe and stuff like
Oh, that's
that.
so cool.
Yeah, he's awesome. And then Tom Ryan did my Mario Brothers inspired
Mhm.
cover. He does anything under the sun too. He's a really great artist. And then the comic book cover, which is kind of the more traditional hand drawn, is by a local artist named by me, whose name is Joe Garceau. He's up and coming. He's done covers for Nottingham and Popeye and
Mhm.
Dick Tracy. So luckily, I happen to be friends with him, so I was able to get him to contribute a cover for the book as well. So I have a pretty great team of collaborators, and I literally can't do any of it without them because I can't draw anything. So
It was really cool to have it go full circle too, right? To pick up Transformers 3 and then to have someone who's worked on Transformers do a cover for you. I mean, yeah, that
yeah,
is so cool. So for everyone that is watching, right here is the link. Be sure to check it out. And back today, if you can't, you know the drill. Put it on Facebook, Twitter, anywhere you can. Word of mouth is 100% free, and it costs you absolutely nothing to do. Now, Mike, I
Mhm.
know this is your first time on the show, but we love wrapping things up with a piece
Yep.
of advice and what you're up to outside of creating. So,
Okay.
for anyone out there who is looking to become a comic book writer but is struggling with that mental barrier, they're struggling thinking they have to do a certain genre or have to do a certain type of book. What would be your biggest piece of advice to help them break that and just get started writing?
That is a great question, and I think what I would say, the piece of advice whenever and I get asked at conventions occasionally that, and I'll tell people the same thing, which is put it out. Put the thing that you're working on out there, finish it and put it out there. Forget about the idea of perfection. I was very early on doing this at a convention, and I just had my first comic or two out, and I was, chatting with some people, and a lot of people will come up and be like, "Oh, I'm writing stuff." And you're like, "Great." I always encourage that. And
Hmm.
somebody said like, "Yeah, I'm writing a novel. I've been working on it for 10 years." And I was like 10 years, that's like that's a lifetime. I'm like, you need to finish that and put it out. And like I've been doing this about 5 years and I've got 3 full complete graphic novels out. And I'm not saying I'm better or worse than anybody else, but at least my book is out there and people can read it and they
Hmm.
can buy it and I've made money doing it. Is it perfect? No, and I'm certainly not going to say I'm the greatest comic writer in the world, but did I create a comic book or multiple comic books that people actually like? I've gotten that much done, and the reason is because I finished it and I put it out. And so like, I think people are so concerned with like my very first thing has to be the best thing in the world because it's going to be my debut. And it's like, no, your first thing is probably going to be your worst thing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like because you just get experience and I'm very proud of Red, White, and Broke when I read it and back. I go back, I read it from time to time, and I'm like, this is a good book. I'm proud of it. There's still some things I go, I could have done this better. I could have done this a little bit better, whatever. But by the time you get to 8-Bit Slasher, I'm like, again, I'm not humble about this particular book, but I'm like, this book's a banger, man. Like, but it only happened because I actually got it out there.
Yeah.
So write the thing, make it good, of course, right? Don't just churn out your first draft. But like if you're taking 10 years to write something, you have to ask yourself, like, what's the end goal here? Is it ever going to
Hmm.
actually get finished? Or this just a writing exercise? So that's my personal take. That's if you want to sell stuff. If you want to just write that one perfect novel like Harper Lee and write To Kill a Mockingbird and then never write again, then by all means take as much time as you need. But otherwise, you got to finish it and put it out there.
Yeah, you know, you got to have your stepping stones. It's not always going to be perfect. You have to, and I got to realize that too. I'm a perfectionist as well, and that's like the curse, right?
Knock
You
it
want to
off.
make it
Knock
perfect.
it
Do
off.
as many revisions as humanly possible, but eventually the revisions got to stop, and you gotta send it. So,
Yeah.
awesome advice
Yeah.
there. Last but
Thank you.
not least, what are you up
Yes.
to? You know, what comics are you reading? What books are you checking out? What video games are you playing?
Good question. So I read everything. I read a lot of Marvel and DC. I'm not going to lie about that. I'm a big superhero nerd, so I read all the Marvel DC stuff. I read a lot of I mean, any comic company, Image, any of the independents. I'm trying to think of what are the books that I'm into right at the moment that are standing out for me. Um, this is where I always blank because I'm like, what am I actually? I've got a stack of comics 7 feet away
You
from
got a
me
waffle too.
can't reach. I can tell you that Superman Spider-Man #1 is on top of it. Yeah, gosh, I'm a big fan of like Terry Moore, like Strangers in Paradise, all those
Hmm.
things. And if anything jumped out at me recently that's really stood out for me. But like movies, I watch everything. I'm a movie fanatic. This is where like the 8-bit slasher, that movie side of things came out. I'm I One of the things I wrote that's not a comic book is a book called I Want My $2. It's a guide to 80s cult classic movies.
Oh, that's so
I
cool.
love cult classics. I love the 80s, and right now I'm working on a 90s cult classic movie book. So I'm rewatching a lot of my favorite 90s movies, but I watch all the new stuff too. Haven't had as much time to play video games lately, I will admit. I mostly play stuff on my phone, mostly quick things that I can kind of, some of the puzzle games and stuff
Yeah.
like that. I'm not as much of a console gamer, although my son is a huge console gamer, and he was home for spring break, and we played a lot of Mortal Kombat because he's gotten into that, which is a nice throwback for me. And then I've been playing Dispatch, which I know is very popular. So I feel a little bit cool right now that I'm playing
Yeah.
like a current popular game. So yeah, that's been fun too.
That is so cool. So, Mike, thank you so much for swinging by. I know we set this up on short notice, but I appreciate you making time to come hang out with us. Everyone
Thank
that is watching, check out those links. This was an awesome book. I had a chance to check it out, and I loved it. So, if I loved it, chances are you will too. I hope you all have a fantastic day. But most importantly, guys,